Father is suffocating us, and I'm done pretending otherwise. That's what my daughter-in-law said to my son the night she thought I was asleep. She didn't know the walls in that house were thin. She didn't know a lot of things about me. My name is Harold Stanton. I'm 64 years old, and for 2 years I lived in the spare bedroom of my son's house in Scottsdale, Arizona. The bedroom with the window that faced the neighbor's fence and got no morning light. I slept there while they slept in the master suite I'd helped them furnish. I ate dinners at their table and tried not to take up too much space. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself family was family. I had a reason for being there that had nothing to do with need. My wife, Sandra, passed from pancreatic cancer 3 years ago, 14 months from diagnosis to the end. When she died, something in me went quiet in a way I still don't fully understand. I sold our house in Mesa, the one I'd paid off in full, the one where my son had grown up, and I moved in with him and his wife, because I told them I couldn't manage alone. That part was a small lie wrapped inside a larger truth. The grief was real. The helplessness was not. What I didn't tell them was that I'd sold Walker Stan Logistics the year before Sandra got sick, a freight brokerage I'd spent 30 years building, connection by connection, contract by contract. The buyer was a regional firm out of Denver. The number on the check was $9,400,000. I'd invested it carefully over the following year, watched it grow, paid my taxes, and kept very quiet about all of it. I moved into my son's spare room with 2 suitcases and a story about depleted savings. I gave them $1,500 a month toward household expenses. They accepted it the way you accept a parking validation, politely, without looking at it. I did my own laundry, stayed out of their way, picked up my grandson from school on Tuesdays and Thursdays when my daughter-in-law had her Pilates class. I cooked dinner on Sunday nights, because I've always been a decent cook, and it gave me something to do with my hands. What I was doing, really, was watching. My son, Cody, is 36. He works in commercial real estate and makes a comfortable living doing it. He's not a bad person. He's a person who married someone who slowly became the only voice he listened to, and he'd stopped noticing that was happening. My daughter-in-law, Kendra, is 33. Organized, sharp, socially ambitious. She maintained a lifestyle blog about intentional living, and had 40,000 Instagram followers and a strong opinion about everything except her own motives. The first year was fine. Kendra was polite. Not warm, but polite. She called me Harold and offered me coffee in the mornings and occasionally asked how I was feeling with the tone of someone completing a checklist. Cody hugged me when I arrived and seemed genuinely glad I was there. My grandson, Owen, 6 years old, brown hair, big ears, already reading chapter books, crawled into my lap every afternoon and told me about his day like it was the most important news in the world. Owen made it easy to stay. The second year, things shifted. Small things at first. Kendra started mentioning her friend's mother-in-law, who lived so independently in a senior community in Tempe. She left brochures on the kitchen counter once, then claimed she'd gotten them by accident in the mail. Cody began talking about her stress levels at dinner, framing it as concern but always connecting it somehow to the adjustment of having 3 adults in the house. The monthly $1,500 stopped feeling like generosity and started feeling like rent that wasn't covering enough. I noticed. I said nothing. I watched. 6 weeks before the night that changed everything, I drove myself to a cardiologist, a routine appointment, something I'd been scheduling annually since my 60s. The doctor found an irregular heartbeat, atrial fibrillation, manageable with medication, not immediately dangerous, but worth monitoring. He was calm about it. I was calm about it. I was calm about it. I drove home and told Cody at dinner because it seemed like something a father should mention. Kendra put down her fork. So you'll need more appointments? More specialists? Probably a few follow-ups, I said. Nothing serious. She nodded once and picked her fork back up. Cody asked if I was scared. I told him no, and I meant it. But I watched her face when she thought I wasn't looking. Something had calculated itself behind her eyes. The night I heard them, I'd gotten up at 2 a.m. to get a glass of water. Their bedroom was at the end of the hall. Their voices were raised enough to reach me before I reached the kitchen. "I've been patient, Cody. 2 years of patient. I'm done. He's my father, Kendra. He's sick. He has an irregular heartbeat. Half the country over 60 has an irregular heartbeat. That's not sick, that's an excuse. He uses this house like a hotel and contributes almost nothing. He pays $1,500 a month. $1,500. Our mortgage is $3,100, not counting utilities, not counting food, not counting the fact that I have to plan my entire schedule around his. I didn't sign up to run a care facility. I stood in the dark hallway and didn't move. He picks up Owen from school. He cooks on Sundays. I don't need a cook, Cody. I need my house back. I need my marriage back. I need to stop feeling like a guest in my own home because your father is always just there." Cody's voice dropped. I stepped closer to hear. "What do you want me to say to him?" "Say whatever you want. Say it's better for his health. Say we need space. Say we're going through something as a couple. I don't care what you say, but I want him out by the end of the month." Silence. "Okay." His voice was so small. "Okay, I'll talk to him." I walked back to my room carefully, the way you walk when you don't want the floor to creak. I sat on the edge of my bed in the dark. Sandra's photo was on the nightstand. I didn't turn the light on. I sat there and made a decision I'd been quietly preparing for without knowing I was preparing for it. The next morning, Cody came to my room before breakfast. He stood in the doorway with his hands in his pockets and the look of a man who'd rehearsed something and forgotten where he'd put it. "Dad, I've been thinking, it could be healthier, for you to have your own space. More independence, less stress on the heart and everything." "I understand," I said. He blinked. He'd expected pushback. He'd expected guilt. "I'll start looking today," I told him. He left looking more unsettled than when he'd arrived. I didn't start looking at senior communities. I opened Zillow and typed in Scottsdale luxury homes, $500,000 and above, and I spent the morning making notes. I called my financial advisor that afternoon while Cody was at work and Kendra was at Pilates. His name is Tom, and we've known each other for 18 years. He didn't ask too many questions. He transferred $800,000 into my checking account by the end of the week. Cash buyer. In a tight market, that mattered. 3 days later, I met with a realtor named Patricia. Not the same Patricia from every other story, just a coincidence of the name, and we walked through 4 properties in North Scottsdale. The one that stalked me had a courtyard in the back, desert landscaping, a study with east-facing windows that would catch the morning light I'd been missing for 2 years. 3 bedrooms, high ceilings, solid and quiet in the way that only houses with good bones are quiet. I made a full-price cash offer that afternoon. The sellers were relocating to Portland. They accepted within 6 hours. That night I sat at my desk in the spare room and wrote the note I'd leave behind. I drafted it 4 times. The first version was too warm. The second was too cold. The third sounded like a legal document. The fourth was just right. "Thank you for having me these past 2 years. I found a place of my own and will be out by Thursday morning. I've left this month's contribution on the kitchen counter. Don't worry about the suffocation anymore. Harold." That last line, "Don't worry about the suffocation anymore." Kendra's exact word borrowed back to her. I read it twice. It was right. I closed on the house on a Wednesday. I had arranged movers for Thursday at 7 in the morning. Kendra did yoga in the backyard at 6:30. Cody left for the office at 7:15. I had a 15-minute window. I moved in 12. The movers were efficient. I'd lived lightly in that spare room, never fully unpacked, which I understood now had been deliberate. Some quiet part of me always knowing. By 9:30, the truck was pulling out of the new driveway. I set the note on the kitchen counter beside the envelope with $1,500 in cash, my last contribution. Then I locked the spare bedroom door from the outside with the key they'd given me and left it in the mailbox on my way down the driveway. I didn't look back at the house. I'd stopped needing to. Cody texted at 6 that evening. "Got your note. Hope the new place works out. Take care of yourself." 11 words. The period at the end of "take care of yourself" was a complete sentence about who my son had become. I didn't respond. The first week in my own house was the best week I'd had since Sandra died. I bought a coffee maker I actually liked. I arranged my books the way I wanted them. I ate dinner on the back patio watching the Sonoran Desert turn gold at sundown and felt something loosen in my chest that I hadn't noticed was tight. I started my heart medication at 7 every morning, walked 30 minutes each afternoon, slept without listening for footsteps in the hallway. On the 8th day, I called my attorney. Her name is Vivian Pratt, and we'd worked together when I sold the company. She's 62, silver-haired, completely unsentimental, and one of the sharpest people I've ever met. Vivian, I said, I need to update my estate documents, and then I need you to schedule a meeting with my son. To tell him what? She asked. Everything. She was quiet for a moment. How much does he think you have? He thinks I had a small business that sold for almost nothing, and that I've been living off savings that are nearly gone. Another pause. And the reality? A little over $9 million in liquid assets, not counting the property I just purchased. Vivian's silence had a quality to it I recognized. The silence of a professional recalibrating. When do you want to meet? As soon as you can schedule it. She called me 3 days later. Cody had agreed to come in Friday morning. She told him it was routine estate planning. He'd asked, "Does he need me to bring anything?" She'd said no. I know what happened in that meeting because Vivian gives thorough reports and because Cody's voicemails afterward provided their own detailed account. He arrived in business casual, still half thinking about a meeting he had afterward. Vivian was precise and professional and let the documents do the talking. She slid the first page across the desk, my investment portfolio summary, my name at the top, the total in bold, and watched his face. He stared at it for almost a full minute. Is this a different Harold Stanton? Your father, Vivian confirmed. He told me he barely had enough to, he said the house sale barely covered. Cody stopped. Vivian explained it all. The logistics company sale. The investment timeline. The $9.5 million, give or take growth. The monthly $1,500 he'd accepted as the modest contribution of a man with dwindling resources. Cody sat very still. He was living in our spare room, he finally said. He was picking up Owen from school. He gave us $1,500 a month because he chose to, Vivian said, not because he had to. She delivered the final information with the same measured tone she uses for everything. His estate documents had been updated. Cody was no longer the primary beneficiary. A significant portion would go to established charitable organizations. A protected trust had been established for Owen, accessible at 25, untouchable by anyone else. Cody left Vivian's office and sat in his car in the parking garage for 45 minutes. I know this because the parking attendant mentioned it when Vivian validated his ticket. He called me 6 times that afternoon. I watched the phone light up each time and set it back down. His voicemails went from confused to apologetic to something that approached genuine. By the 6th one, his voice had cracked open in a way that sounded less rehearsed than the others. Kendra's call started an hour later. She was less confused and more strategic. Her messages were careful, composed. "We should talk, Harold. We've been so worried. The children miss you. The children miss you." The children, meaning Owen, who was 6 and didn't fully understand what had happened, and their daughter Maisie, who was 3 and definitely didn't. I deleted each message and made a note about Owen. I also called Tom that evening and asked him to pull up the documents I'd had drafted 2 years earlier, the day before I moved into their spare room. One document in particular. The day I moved in, I'd handed Cody a check for $40,000. I told him it was for the kitchen renovation they'd been putting off and some help with the mortgage during my stay. He'd looked genuinely moved. He'd hugged me. He'd said, "Dad, you didn't have to." What he didn't read, what he'd signed without reading, because he trusted me and because I'd told him it was just an acknowledgement for tax purposes, was a promissory note for $40,000. Principal, 4.5% annual interest, 5-year term with an acceleration clause. Vivian drafted the demand letter. It arrived certified mail on the Tuesday. Cody had to sign for it. I know the number on the letter because Vivian and I had calculated it together, $48,000, $640. 3 years of compounded interest on top of principal, payable in full within 90 days per the acceleration clause I'd invoked. I was told his hands were shaking when he opened it. Kendra's response was to hire her own attorney, a family law specialist who billed $400 an hour and spent 2 appointments explaining that competent adults can distribute their assets however they choose, and that there was no legal mechanism to compel inclusion in a will. She walked out of the second meeting with less than she'd walked in with and a bill that added insult to the injury. At home, they calculated. Their savings, $32,000. Cody's annual salary, comfortable but not liquid. The house they'd bought with help from the $40,000 now subject to a lien that made a home equity loan impossible until the debt was satisfied. They called 3 banks. 3 banks said the same thing. They tried a credit union in Tempe. Same answer. Kendra began selling things. A designer handbag collection she'd curated over 5 years. Exercise equipment. The Peloton, $2,000. A dining table she'd spent weeks selecting. Gone for $800. Her followers noticed the change in her content. Fewer aspirational morning routines. More vague captions about simplicity and reflection. Someone posted a screenshot in a local Facebook group titled Scottsdale Mamas with the caption, "Isn't this the woman who kicked her sick father-in-law out so she could have the guest room back?" The post got 214 comments. By week 4, she deleted her Instagram entirely. Cody's performance review at work came back with language about inconsistent focus and missed deliverables. His manager scheduled a formal check-in. He sat through it like a man watching himself from a distance. They'd assembled $61,000 by the 8th week, still nearly $40,000 short with 30 days left. Their first real fight, the kind that doesn't smooth over, happened on a Wednesday night. I know because Owen called me that Thursday. He'd gotten my number from a card Vivian had sent me, which had been sitting on Cody's desk. Owen was 7 now, about to turn 8. He'd found the card, memorized the number, and called from his mother's phone while she was giving Maisie a bath. "Grandpa Harold." Something in my chest shifted when I heard his voice. "Hey, buddy. Why don't you come over anymore?" "Well, I have my own house now. It's a little far." "Did we do something bad?" "No." I said it without hesitation. "You didn't do anything bad. You and Maisie are completely fine. Mom cries sometimes when she thinks we're not looking." He said it plainly, the way children report facts. "And Dad doesn't eat dinner with us as much." I closed my eyes. "Owen, sometimes grown-ups make mistakes that take a while to fix. Your parents are working on some things. It's not about you." "Okay." He didn't sound fully convinced. "Do you still have the same chocolate chip cookie recipe? The one with the brown sugar?" It caught me off guard enough that I almost laughed. "I do." "Can we make them sometime?" After he hung up, I sat in my study for a long time. Then I called Vivian. "I heard from Owen tonight." "Huh," she said. "He asked if they'd done something wrong." She was quiet for a moment. "What do you want to do?" "I don't want to destroy Cody," I said. "I want him to understand what he was willing to do to me. There's a difference." "There is," she agreed. "It's an important one. I want to offer terms." By week 10, they'd scraped together $69,000. They'd borrowed $12,000 from Kendra's parents, who had been quietly horrified by the situation, and even more quietly unable to say so without implicating their daughter. Cody was working weekend showings on top of his regular load. Kendra had picked up part-time work doing social media management for a dental office, which was its own quiet humiliation given her former following. The email arrived in Vivian's inbox on a Sunday evening. She forwarded it to me Monday morning. It was long, longer than I'd expected. Cody had written most of it, I could tell. His voice, his rhythm. But Kendra's section at the end was shorter and more painful to read for exactly that reason. She's a careful writer normally. This paragraph wasn't careful. "Harold, I said you were suffocating us. That was wrong, and I knew it was wrong when I said it. I said it anyway because it was easier than admitting that I'd become someone who measured people by what they cost. You didn't cost us anything. You gave us everything you had to give, and we treated it like an inconvenience. I'm sorry. I don't expect you to believe that yet. I just needed you to know I'm aware of what I did. I read it 3 times. Then I called Vivian and told her to arrange a meeting. I chose a restaurant downtown, a quiet place I'd been going to for years, good coffee, corner booth in the back. Neutral and public, which I'd learned was the right combination for conversations that needed to stay controlled. They arrived 5 minutes early. I arrived exactly on time. The difference in those 5 minutes told me something about where things stood. Cody had aged in 10 weeks. Not dramatically, but noticeably. He sat across from me with the posture of someone who'd been carrying weight for long enough that he'd forgotten how to put it down. Kendra sat beside him. Her eyes were dry. She'd made a decision before she walked in not to cry, and she was holding to it. I ordered coffee. Didn't ask if they wanted anything. Let them feel the silence for a moment. Cody spoke first. Dad, I don't have a speech. I don't have an explanation that fixes what I did. I let someone talk about my father like he was an inconvenience, and I agreed with her. And then I walked into your room the next morning and used the word healthier to say what she'd actually asked me to say. That's what I did. I know that. He stopped. His voice had steadied itself, but just barely. You spent 30 years building something. You took care of Mom through the worst thing either of you ever went through. You moved into our spare room and paid $1,500 a month and picked up Owen from school twice a week and cooked dinner every Sunday, and that whole time I was letting Kendra convince me that you were the problem. He shook his head. I failed you, Dad. I'm sorry. I let that land. Then I looked at Kendra. She held my gaze. I measured you in dollars, she said. That's the truth of it. When I found out what you actually have, my first feeling wasn't shame. It was panic. That's who I'd become. She paused. I'm working on who I want to be instead. It's slower than I'd like. The honesty was harder to sit with than an excuse would have been. I pulled a folder from my bag. Inside, the promissory note with Cody's signature. Their bank statements from the past 10 weeks. Vivian had obtained them through proper channels. And a single typed page with 5 numbered items. My terms, I said, non-negotiable. They leaned in together. First, the $69,000 they'd collected would be paid to me as partial satisfaction. I would forgive the remaining balance. The debt was done. Second, 6 months of weekly family therapy, a specific practice in Scottsdale I'd already contacted, not optional. Third, my will remained changed. Owen and Maisie's trust was protected. Cody and Kendra received $100,000 total upon my death, not each total. Fourth, a private acknowledgement to immediate family. Not social media, not public spectacle. A conversation with Kendra's parents and Cody's aunt, the only family members who'd been asking questions. Fifth, Owen visits. Every other Saturday, my house, cookies, whatever he wanted to do, non-negotiable. Cody read it twice. Kendra read it once. If you refuse, I said, Vivian pursues the full balance in court. You lose the house, you start over. Your choice. You have 48 hours. I stood to go. Dad, Cody's voice stopped me. Will you ever actually be okay with us again? Not the terms. Actually. I thought about Owen on the phone asking about brown sugar cookies. I thought about Maisie, who was 3 and would not remember any of this. I thought about what Sandra would have said about all of it, and I thought she probably would have been harder on them than I was being. I don't know yet, I said. That part is yours to build. I'll tell you if I see it happening. They called Vivian before the 48 hours were up. The family gathering was at my cousin Ruth's house in Mesa. About 20 people. Cody and Kendra arrived holding hands, which I noted. Kendra had stopped wearing her aspirational linen sets and was in something more practical. Small thing. I noticed it anyway. Cody stood in Ruth's living room and said what needed to be said. He didn't look at Kendra for support. He looked at me. My wife's sister, who had not been told but had suspected, started crying before he finished. Ruth handed her a napkin without looking surprised. Kendra spoke briefly. Less than a minute. More than enough. When she finished, I stood. I accept your apology, I said. What happens next is decided by what you do, not what you said here. Afterward, Ruth pulled me aside in the kitchen. They really did that, she said, still a little amazed. Threw you out. They did. Sandra would be livid. Sandra would have already forgiven them and then given Kendra a very long look she'd never forget. Ruth laughed. It was the first time I'd laughed at anything connected to this in months. It felt good. Something cautious inside me moved an inch or two toward open. The first Saturday with Owen was 3 weeks later. I'd stocked the kitchen with brown sugar, chocolate chips, flour, and every other thing a 7, almost 8-year-old might need for a productive afternoon. He arrived in Cody's car, clambered out before the door was fully open, and stood at the end of my driveway looking at the courtyard. "This is your house?" he said. "This is my house. It's big. Big enough." He came inside and went directly to the kitchen, apparently having thought about little else since the phone call. We made 2 batches. He ate 4 cookies before dinner, and I let him because his grandfather's house, his grandfather's rules, and also because Sandra always said the point of grandparents was to be a little less sensible than parents, and she was right about most things. We ate the second batch on the back patio while the desert turned its particular shade of burnt orange. Owen told me about his teacher, his best friend, whose name was apparently Tobias, a book he was reading about deep-sea fish, and a game he'd invented involving his bike and a piece of chalk that I didn't fully follow but found completely convincing. I listened the way you listen when you know time is the thing you can't get back. The trust fund for Owen and Maisie was filed in October, a separate structure for each of them, $2 million apiece, accessible at 25, managed by Vivian until then. Cody and Kendra signed the acknowledgement without hesitation. "This is the best thing you've ever done for us," Cody said when he signed, "even if it doesn't feel like it's for us." "It's for them," I said. "You understand the difference." He nodded, slowly, like a man who recently learned what understanding things actually cost. By November, I had a routine I liked. Mondays, I walked the trail behind my neighborhood, 2 miles in the cool of the morning. Tuesdays and Thursdays, I volunteered at a small business incubator downtown, helping first-generation entrepreneurs write business plans and understand their numbers. I'd done it alone and from nothing once. Watching other people do it still meant something to me. Saturdays with Owen, every other one, now that things had settled. Occasional dinners with Cody alone when Kendra had her therapy appointment and the kids were with her parents. We were rebuilding something, Cody and I, though it was a different structure than what we'd had before. Smaller rooms, better foundation. I hired a gardener and then 3 weeks later fired him and decided to do it myself. The work was good, concrete and satisfying in a way that thinking about people rarely is. One evening in December, I sat in my study with a bourbon and the 2 photographs I kept on my desk. One was Sandra, the summer we drove the Pacific Coast Highway 20 years ago, somewhere north of Big Sur with the window down and her hair doing what it always did in the wind. The other was Owen at the kitchen table in October, flour on his nose, very serious about the precise placement of a chocolate chip. Between them was a single page, the final updated estate document, signed and filed, everything arranged. I thought about what Cody had asked me at the restaurant, whether things would ever be actually okay. I still didn't have a complete answer, but I had a study full of morning light, and a grandson who called to ask about cookie recipes and a life I'd rebuild on ground that belonged to me. That for now was the answer, and for now it was enough. I keep thinking about the moment Cody said, "Okay," not the argument, not the lawyer's office, not even Kendra's face at the gate, just that one word, "Okay," quiet and defeated and chosen. That's the moment I come back to. Because that's where it actually happened, not when I walked out the door, not when the 9 million landed on a desk and rearranged everything they thought they knew. It happened in that hallway, at 2 in the morning, when my son had a chance to say something different and didn't. What followed was just consequence, catching up to decision. That's how it always works. Not punishment from somewhere outside us. Just the weight of our own choices arriving, eventually, at our front door. What I've had to sit with is this. I spent 2 years in that spare room watching carefully, and I was right about almost everything I saw. But being right didn't make it painless. It made it thorough. There's a difference, and it took me a while to understand that the difference matters. I think about the kind of man I tried to raise Cody to be. I wasn't a perfect father, nobody is, but I was a present one. I showed up, I paid attention. I built something over 30 years and tried to model what it looks like to do things with integrity, to make decisions you can live with the morning after, to keep your word even when keeping it cost you something. Somewhere along the way, the lesson didn't fully take, or it took and then got quietly overwritten by comfort and by someone else's priorities. That happens in a marriage. I understand it now better than I did when Sandra was alive. What Kendra said in that restaurant, that she'd measured me in dollars and that her first feeling when she learned the truth was panic, not shame, was one of the most honest things anyone has said to me in years. It cost her something to say it. I could see that, and I've come to believe that the willingness to look clearly at your own worst moment, without softening it, without building an excuse around it, is one of the harder things a person can do. It's also where everything real begins. Owen called last week to ask if we could try a different cookie, oatmeal raisin, which is frankly a controversial choice, but I told him we'd give it a fair hearing. He laughed the way kids laugh when they've said something they know is a little absurd. That sound, uncomplicated, completely present, is what I was protecting when I set those terms at the restaurant. Not the money, not the principle, that. The things I've learned from all of this aren't lessons I could have read somewhere. They had to cost me something to become real. I know now that showing up for people, consistently and without fanfare, is a form of intelligence that most people only recognize in its absence. I know that quiet persistence, not the dramatic kind, not the kind that announces itself, but the kind that just keeps going in the right direction, is what actually builds a life worth living. And I know that how you treat someone when you think they have nothing to offer you is the most honest thing about your character. Cody is learning that, slowly, in the way that real learning goes, not in a single conversation, but over months of showing up differently. I'm watching to see if it holds. The study gets good light now, every morning. I didn't know how much I'd miss that until I had it back.